Okay, greetings and welcome to Legali's Pan-African Community News Update. Today's date is the 28th of April 2024. I'm Brother Dr. Toyin Agbetu. I'm in the studio, as you can see, with the lovely and wonderful sister Oleander. We're going to go for a review of community-related news over the past 4 weeks. So welcome back. We normally do this fortnightly, but we took a little break. If you're watching live, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, and share if you like this broadcast or you find it useful. Sister Oleander, do you want to give us a mic check and say anything to anyone?
Yeah, it's nice to see a few of you have already connected with us, so that's wonderful. Please remember, I'll be monitoring the chats. If you've got any comments or questions, please don't hesitate to let us know.
Thank you. Okay. And so as ever, just let us know that you can hear us okay and see us okay. So chats are always useful. Just keeps us knowing that we're not just going out into the ether, that you're actually there with us. But it's a packed program. Try to condense it. We can't cover everything that happened over the last 4 weeks. You know how much news we get even in a fortnight. So we try to cover some things that give us a snapshot of where we are as a community. But what I'm going to do right now is start, as usual, with libations to those that have recently passed or any notable anniversaries. So let me get started. And our first libation is to Ras Bandele Selassie, who ran the Rastafari Culture Centre in St. Paul's in Bristol for over 40 years. Now, he was the Rastafari High Priest of the Southwest of England. In 1994, actually, he got use of the building on Grosvenor Road, which was gifted to him, or that wasn't gifted to him, it was gifted to the family of Marlon Thomas. And he's the young 18-year-old who was attacked by a gang of racist fairground workers on Durden Down. Now, this story is not very familiar to us in London, but in Bristol, he's, I suppose, the equivalent of what Stephen Lawrence. So we have a Stephen Lawrence Day, which just recently passed, but in Bristol, Marlon Thomas is that name that people also remember because, and I'll explain a bit more about that later. But Ras Bandele Selassie, he was given the top floor of the building on Grosvenor Road, where he created this centre. He was a mentor to many young people in the African Caribbean community, as our community, of course, and as well as being an advocate of peace. Now, our elder shone a light on the Rastafarian faith. He passed away at the age of 73 following a short illness. Yeah, it was, his work was invaluable. I can't say that. I mean, the amount of things I've read about people who met him, who are having spiritual troubles in their life, and they had counsel with him, and he gave them advice and helped them move forward. It's a tragic loss. I found one quote, which I'm trying to find for you now, where he said that the importance of the Rastafarian Culture Centre could not be put into words. People from all walks of life come to the centre, from university students to people struggling with poor mental health, to people coming from prison. They all come here to calm down. It is used as the people's safe space. Ras Bandele Selassie had many, many supporters and fans and people who respected the work he does. So he joins the ancestors, having done some amazing work for our community. We remember. Now, the next libation is to the author and novelist, who, and that's her name, Guadeloupe, born author Maurice Condé. Now, please forgive me my mispronunciation. I'm not very good with the French language. Now, this author, like I said, she came from Guadeloupe. She wrote novels and plays tackling the legacy of slavery and colonialism. Focuses specifically on the Caribbean and Africa. She joined the ancestors at the age of 90. She was a very celebrated voice in French-speaking work. I'm not familiar with her work. I should say that straight up. But her books included the titles Segu and I Tituba, which is translated, I think, to Black Witch of Salem. But it was her first book, which is quite interesting. I don't know if I pronounced this right, Himakahonons, which translates to Waiting for Happiness. And this one caused quite a lot of controversy, actually, because this book was actually writing about the flaws of African socialism. And it really had people up in arms, because even though she was trying to promote African dignity and empowerment, she critiqued African liberation movements quite savagely. And in this particular case, Free African or West African countries actually ordered copies of the books to be destroyed. Now, of course, I don't believe in censorship and destroying the books, but the point is that she attacked MCA's negative movement, for one example. And there are certain things I didn't quite like from what I've read about her critique on Pan-Africanist movement and African liberation. She says that in those days, the entire world was talking of the success of African socialism. But she said, I dare to say these countries were victims of dictators prepared to starve their populations. And I think that's a little bit unkind and not quite accurate. But she has joined the ancestors. She did win an alternative Nobel Peace Prize. And she did make people aware of the conditions that were taking place in the Caribbean and on the motherland. And for that, we do respect her forthright views, even if we don't always have to agree with all of them. So we remember. Okay, and this is not a libation in the sense of we're not talking about someone who's recently passed, but this is actually an in remembrance. So it's one of our memorial series. And this is actually just to remind us about the uprisings that took place in St. Paul's, Bristol in 1980, because it's the anniversary, happened on 2nd of April. And this was really the result of racist sus laws. And those uprisings, we know about the ones in 1981 that took place in Brixton, and of course London, Toxteth, and Handsworth, so Liverpool and Birmingham, as well as Chapeltown, Leeds. I mustn't forget that. These uprisings took place in 1981, but it was in St. Paul's, Bristol, where the spark initially started from. And it's a very powerful piece of our history. In the image, you'll see a picture of one of our warrior queens, elder Sister Jen Dye. And when she was speaking to the media on this issue, she says that these events happened because young people were disaffected. They experienced so much racism. They were dealing with unemployment, police brutality, police harassment. And what we might not know now, but then in 1980, there was nothing but anger, despair, and hopelessness. And in many ways, it's how a lot of young people are feeling now, especially when fed by racist media narratives. And that's really important, because Sister Jen Dye in this interview talks about the newspapers in Bristol that really kind of like were Afrophobic and painted our community in such a negative light. And I would argue that we are in that same space now. And if we mix that with the narratives we see around what we saw around Black Lives Matter, and of course what we're hearing about with the Palestinian struggle, then we're not that far away from this kind of climate coming back: unemployment, police brutality, police harassment. So we remember those youth uprisings. They're very important. They led to the development of the Malcolm X Centre in Bristol, which even though it was a good idea, it wasn't well thought through. She tells us it wasn't even fit for purpose when it was first built. Since the 1980s, the space hasn't really had any capital investment, so it stayed the same. It's not quite ready for the 21st century. I've done a few workshops there as well. I know what she's talking about. The character of the space, the energy of the space in Bristol is amazing, but it needs investment. And it's been run down, which is something we see with community centres that do good community work. Often the local authorities in that area turn a blind eye to putting some serious money into it, and we're supposed to be happy with just having a space without resources. So we remember, and this is really a tribute to those young people and who push back against state brutality. The image, if you're looking in the image and you see the policemen, then you're thinking, why they've got milk crates in their hand as opposed to truncheons and shields? The reason why I say this is a very important part of our history is because at that stage, the police didn't know how to deal with African uprisings in the UK. You've got to remember, it's like the history of Ma'afa, so enslavement, where they could use lethal force and nobody would come back against them apart from us fighting them was one thing. But in the UK, having kind of young people coming up, they just weren't prepared for it. They thought we were so docile, would never attack back. So they were caught on the hop. and hence they were picking up everything, to fight us, mill bowl crates, bottles, rocks, everything. It's only later on when it came to Brixton and Toxteth and Handsworth and Chapeltown when you started seeing riot shields and batons and tear gas, etc. But initially, those young people in Bristol, they led the way and caught the police on the hub. We remember. Okay, the next we remember is coming to London. I mean, this is the one. I remember this one so well. This is the Brixton bombings, David Copeland. It's a horrible story. This was, I don't even want to say far right, because there is no far right anymore, because the government is actually right wing and they're extremists. We're not supposed to use the word extremists for mainstream politicians, but that's what they've done. The politicians we have now are extremists. But back then, the term far right was invoked to explain people who are outside that fringe. And David Copeland was one of them. He launched a terrorist attack on the African community in Brixton, and he used a series of nail bombs to kill and injure hundreds of people. He wanted to create what they called a racial war on the streets of London. So he was deliberately antagonizing people, and of course our community. And in a particular incident, you can see on the screen what happened is that he had placed a bomb inside one of these sports hodls outside and left it by a bus stop. Now, this was near an Iceland store, which was one of those supermarkets. And what happened was that members of our community saw this package and thought there's something odd about that. And they became very suspicious. So what they did, because the bag was unattended, they thought it might be a bomb or there might be something off. So they moved it away from the stores and put it on some pallets. And then they went off and called the police. Now, what happened while the police took their time and they came, they arrived on the scene, they were talking to everyone around, you need to move back and stuff like that. And the security guard at Iceland, his name is Oleander. He's the one you can see on the top screen next to David Copeland. He put his own safety before everyone else. And what he did was trying to move people, saying, look, please move away, be careful. He acted as a human shield. We've heard the term human shield being propagandized by the state of Israel as some kind of like terrorist strategy, but actually no. What he was doing, he was using his body as a human shield to protect people and telling them, you need to move because we don't know what it is right now. And as he was doing that, the device exploded, and 1,500 nails just went poof, and they fired off in all directions like bullets, and they hit if you've got to imagine, this is in the heart of Brixton. They hit hundreds of people, and we know at least 40 of them who were injured. We're talking about, I don't know what's happened there. 40 of them that were injured. We saw they were people who had ones in their legs. Someone had it in their penis, in their buttocks. We saw. The mix was just crazy. Ribs. And the image you can see there is the one that made the newspaper, is that of a child. This is a 23-month-old child. It penetrated the outer layer of his brain. Miraculously, he survived. Now, incredibly, that Brixton bomb explosion, no one died. Like I said, that child survived, and even our hero, he still recovered after the injuries that he suffered from the bombs hitting his, and penetrating his skull. Sadly, Copeland escaped at that time. He detonated bombs in Brick Lane and Soho, targeting both Asians and sort of like the LGBT community. He killed people in the subsequent bombings. They found him in the end, not through his family. None of them kind of like gave him up. It was a friend who recognized an image of him, and then he was arrested and stuff like that. But we remember, in the Brixton bombing, the fact that he practiced in Brixton first. And, this is kind of like, the idea of creating a race war is just something that we have to remember, that often we are the guinea pigs for these extremists. And now the extremists are in government. The tactics are still the same, just the words are much more fancier. Move on. So I just want to say welcome. Again, you are watching the Galley's Pan-African Community News Update. If you are watching live, you are welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. And please subscribe, like, and share if you find this broadcast useful. And I can see Oleander's on the screen.
Yes. We have a message from Keith Hall saying, "Good to have us back."
Greetings, Brother Keith. Good to have you with us.
And 2 messages from Learn to Dig 2 Pits. "Peace and love, family." Same
Peace
to
and love to
you.
you too. Thank you.
And in 1976, police were forced to use dustbin lids to protect themselves during the Notting Hill Carnival.
Yeah, they didn't know. You're right. They had no idea how to defend. They just thought that we'd be compliant, stop, big arm in the law. And they realized that actually you can't. I mean, SUS, just for people who don't know the context of SUS, and thank you for that, brother. The context of SUS wasn't just targeting young people in our community. The police were also targeting our grandparents. So they would be in the park on the benches, and officers would come up to them and start harassing them and searching them. And if they didn't like the look of them or they didn't answer in a deferential tone, they would arrest them. And so this was a harassment which was intergenerational. It affected us in so many ways. And we opened with a libation to our brother, the Rasta. One thing I had to remind us, some of us who don't really know our history and who look down at our community organisations and the way that we worked, the Rastafarian community back in the day were our police force. They were our Black Panthers. They were the one that would protect us. I live in Hackney, and when I was being chased by skinheads, it was kind of like that film, The Warriors. I knew if I could get to Sandringham Road, I would be safe. And you'd run through Hackney. You had to run from the police. You had to run from the skinheads. It was an awful time. And I know there's this documentary, which is about Asian resistance to racism, which I've now got copies of, and I'm going to watch that and stuff. And it's really good because what they call Black and Brown unity, which is African and Asian unity, this political blackness, was actually a good thing at that time. It's broken down now, unfortunately, but it was a very good thing in that time. But we had to actually police ourselves. So I just thought I'd give you some context why we have to remember and pay respect and umbrage to those who went before us. And it's not just mindless rioting as the media will have us think. Actually, these are well-informed, well-strategized, kind of like, and patient. I mean, I think our elders were so patient before they pushed back. Let me leave it there. You are watching Legali's Pan-African Community News Update. We're now going to go to the news section, which basically looks at general domestic issues affecting our community from the last 4 weeks. So I'm going to start with the tragic story of Daniel Alabi. His body was found by the police. He was aged 5 years old. After the police launched an appeal to find him, he went missing from his home in Thamesmead, South East London, and there was hope that obviously he would be found safe. But the police did find a body, and they said they do believe it to be Daniel. He was found in the water. He was taken to hospital in a critical condition, but it was there that he was pronounced gone. Now, the police said there's no evidence to suggest any other person was involved. So, I can't give you any more information than that. It's a tragic story, and we remember you, Daniel. Okay, this one we saw a little bit. I think Oleander and I we caught the daughter speaking on this one. The image you can see is of an elder Sonny Suberu, and he's now at age 60 from London, and he passed away on the 25th of March. I say passed away. I'm tempted to say he lost his life, and that's probably more accurate, after falling from the 22nd floor of an apartment in Fenham Pens district at around 10:30 at night. Now, he was taken to hospital after his body was found and pronounced dead. Now, the reason why, if I sound and seem a little bit funny about this one, is because there was a police report that was done, and they concluded that the elder, who was an IT consultant, had taken his own life. They did a toxicology investigation. The report revealed there was no narcotics in his system. Our elder was a published author. He was in the process of writing his 3rd book. He knew the area. He knew he was full of life. He'd been on trips through Southeast Asia in the past. He had visited Thailand and the Philippines, and it was only when he arrived in Cambodia, rented this room, that he supposedly just decided to jump off the 22nd floor of a building. And the reason why it resonated with us, and why, if I sound skeptical and why I sound, perhaps a little angry as well, is because something stinks. If you watch the interview on the BBC, his daughter, Shannon Boateng, she explained that she was heartbroken. She'd been trying to find out what happened to her father. She doesn't believe that he took his own life. I frankly don't either. But what's really distressing is that she says that she feels like the British government has let the whole family down big time. They've asked for help. The dad, was a British citizen. He'd lived in London his whole life. Nothing that the authorities said made any sense. They told her that they won't bring her dad's body back to the UK, so she can't bury him here, and she just needs closure. She needs closure for the sake of her dad. She keeps, wondering, how long am I going to have to question what happened to my dad? What did someone do? How did he die? And she said, it's killing me, and I can understand that pain. She knows something's off. She knows something's not right. But despite him being British, despite her being British, they've got insufficient support from the UK government. So, we can only keep an eye on this story. But it's just a reminder that many people will tell us that, having a British passport and being British has these privileges and the nation will look after us. But it depends on your ethnicity, your ethnic identity. If you're of African heritage, we can see that actually we're not really well protected by the state, even when we go abroad. Even in death, they won't even look after us. And we know this from Windrush. But even in this awful circumstance, it's quite disgusting that there's no support. I'm going to move on. Like I said, you are watching the Galley's Pan-African Community News Update. If you're watching live, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Please, Sister Oleander is monitoring the systems, so the messages, let us know you can hear. Well, we know you can hear us because some of you have already given us comments. Give thanks. But if you have questions, answers, comments, please let us know, and we'll do our best to share them and discuss them and answer them. And as usual, I'm not very good with social media, but don't forget to subscribe, click the like button, that's also useful, and share it. If you find this broadcast useful, the information, share it amongst your friends, family. Let them have a quick update on what's going on as well. I say quick, with the amount of news we have to go through, it sometimes takes a little bit of time, but if they're interested, it's all in one place. Anyway, the next section is a review of politics around the UK. This is from stuff that's took place over the last 4 weeks. Sister Oleander. That's strange. Let's see if we can. There we go. Sister Oleander, I take it we have a message or messages.
Yes, we have a message from. Oh, sorry.
Or is that my computer?
Yes, you. It's you.
Oh, that's me. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay, great. We have a message from Kay or Kai. Greetings, Brother Toyin. Good to hear and see you once again. Thank you for the heads up on the Church of England Zoom call a few weeks ago. Do you have any update on where it's gone since that Zoom call over a month ago? Thanks, Carl.
Give thanks, Kai, and greetings, and thank you for being with us. No, someone sent me a video. There's actually a YouTube video of the meeting of what took place. And so I watched it. I think I watched around 2/3 of it, to be honest with you. So I went through. There wasn't anything substantive in it. And I suppose that I'm not being harsh, and I'm giving it benefit of doubt because it was the first discussion, and and so it's going through. So I don't know what the progression is on that. I did get an email from our sister, Bill Ribeiro Ade, who's the MP, who's looking into reparation issues on our behalf. There was an event from someone who was visiting at the House of Parliament last week. Unfortunately, I was out of the country. I only came back actually very late last night. I was in Amsterdam. So literally, the reason why this program's late is literally because I flew in and all day I couldn't even watch my beloved Columbo. I've been working on putting a program together, and so I wasn't able to make that event, so I don't really know if anything's happened from there. But I will try and find out. So by the next time we have a program, if there has been any developments on the reparations issue, I'll try and reflect it in the news. But from the Church of England position, there doesn't seem to be much action. The announcements have been made. People are still talking about it. There's a couple of reparations related stories this week. People are talking about it, but it is a lot of talk as far as I can see right now. And if there is going to be finance or a pot of cash put out there for development purposes, even though, as you probably know from my position, that reparations must be more than compensation, or it's an insult to our ancestors, it's an insult to us. I still think that kind of like what do you call it, a cost of living crisis in a situation like right now, where a lot of our people are vulnerable. This is a perfect time for that investment to be put to good use. So I will keep an eye out for that and try and report for that in a fortnight's time. Oh, thanks for the question. I'm going to move on now to the politics section. And the first story is one about our elder, Conroy Dowie. Now, he was a victim of the British government's Windrush scandal. Oops, once again, Windrush scandal. And he says that he fears the government is just waiting for us to die off before it pays any compensation. And I think he's right. Our elder is 67. He served in the British Army. Yeah, he faced deportation twice because he lacked the immigration documentation that was demanded by the Home Office as part of its hostile environment policies. You've got to remember that this scheme, which was launched, now it's 5 years ago. It seems like it was yesterday, but it's actually now 5 years ago. Received widespread outrage after it was exposed. I think it was Amelia Gentleman in the Guardian, and the public found out that thousands of Africans in the UK, largely of African Caribbean heritage, were deliberately wrongly classified as being in the country illegally, and this led to many of them being wrongfully deported, losing their jobs, and being denied access to healthcare and housing. I don't really need to talk to you about what the Windrush situation was, but I do want to make the point that our elders making, that they are playing the long game. We're hearing now much about the Horizon scandal, and rightly so. The people in the post office who were imprisoned due to the corruption of the British government and the post office. But what's happening is that other scandals, things like the Grenfell, the Windrush, all of these have been put on the back burner. And, we're doing our best. There was a remembrance event for Windrush pioneers recently, and candles were lit at that event. And just to remember and honor those people who have lost their lives since the scandal erupted in 2018. But the Home Office is still claiming, that it's doing its best, that it's paid over £80 million, and I think it says over 90% or 80-something% of the claims have been answered or something. These are all politics. This is all deception. I mean, I think I've spoken about statistics about those who haven't claimed, and the fact that it's the government that caused the problem that's assessing the claims and making the compensation, and this needs to be given to an independent organisation. But it's important just to keep this in our consciousness, because even though it's been pushed off the agenda and we don't hear much about it anymore, we know as family members that this is something that's affected us for decades, and the cost is very high. And if we can get some kind of justice for those of our family members who bore the brunt of that before they join the ancestors, then we need to do so. This next story is one that those of you who know me from Legality will know that we've been in the story about British abuse in Kenya. Is something that's been part of our work for a long time. It's part of the reason why I came under attack when they tried to accuse me of being anti-Semitic because I exposed the names of those officers who had tortured, raped, and sexually abused in many different ways innocent African people during empire. But there's more legacies from that. There's more other horrendous crimes that have committed since then. And the most recent information we found out is that senior British soldiers have been initiating new recruits deployed at a military base in Kenya into having unprotected sex with prostitutes as a part of this hazing process. And if you don't know what hazing is, I suggest there's many films making light of it. There's this kind of ritual where you try and do something risky or something dangerous to initiate yourself into the fraternity. So what we've learned now from this report is that senior soldiers would flip a coin. Heads you could use a condom, and tails you could not. And then they would find a prostitute, a Kenyan woman, and they would have intimate relationships with them, sometimes very violent. And we know that, as in the case of Agnes Wanjiru, who 12 years ago was stabbed to death and stuffed, her body stuffed in a septic tank. We know that this is something that unfortunately is part of the culture of the British soldiers who serve in Kenya. My throat is getting dry because it makes me angry just talking about this story. If you've been watching what's happening in Palestine and you're watching the behavior of the Israeli soldiers when they go into Palestinian spaces and their homes, and their, and how they treat the children and the women, let alone the men and the boys. But if you're watching those clips, then you'll understand that this practice isn't isolated to them. The British have conducted this for I was going to say decades, but it's actually centuries. But anyway, I'm just sharing this because it's a new report, came out a couple of weeks ago. You can find the article in the Times, I think it is. It'll make you sick. It'll just remind you that this is an ongoing issue. The report is written by the British medical journal Military Health. So it's called Military Health, but it's a British medical journal. So that's how they found it. They're talking about risk of catching sexual transmitted diseases. That's their focus. Our focus is that I was about to swear there, that you're abusing women and you're having unprotected sex, and let me move from there. Sister Oleander, let's just get to something else.
Okay, it's just a quick message from Kai saying, greetings, thank you for your answer to my inquiry. I await your response in the coming weeks.
Thank you. No worries. I'll keep an eye out for you. Okay, let me go to the next story. Unfortunately, it's politics, and none of these stories are going to be exactly, inspiring and share goodwill. But this program's not about that. It's about sharing the news, what happened over the last 4 weeks. So this is the story of a CPS apology being made to the MP Claudia Webb. She was a Labour MP at the time, and she was accused of making a threat of throwing acid over Michelle Merritt in 2021 when she found out she was having intimate relationships with her partner. What happened was that the CPS made this statement. It was untrue. It was a lie. And they refused, or failed, I should say, to properly update the press release, correcting that error. So what happened was that our sister Claudia Webb, she went to the Court of Appeal. They found that she had not made a threat to throw acid, as her trial originally heard, but the CPS still did not issue an update. So what's finally happened is that the CPS has apologised to her. I haven't heard this apology. So they've kept that image out there, the idea that she threatened to throw acid at someone. They said that, the press release is not an issue. They'll make a goodwill payment of £100 to her. That's what it is, right? £100 for attacking her character in a public space. £100, that's what they're going to pay her. That's the CPS, Crown Prosecution Service. Couldn't make it up. This is the reality. Next story, and this one is okay. So headline, as you can read, as a statue exhibition, is the mayor's exit propagandist as Coastal 4 member. Now, what is this talking about? So Rhiannon Graham, who's one of the Coastal 4, I don't know if you remember the Coastal 4, we've spoken about them. These are the brave activists who were picked upon out of all of the thousands who brought down that statue of the slaver Edward Colston and put on trial as you know, in a symbolic sham prosecution to scare everybody else. And the jury of their peers acquitted them. And this was a good thing that they were acquitted, but it wasn't them alone. And so, you know, I've spoken about the statue now finally taking place inside a museum, and I haven't been to Bristol yet, so I haven't actually been able to go and see it. But if you were to go and actually see it, then what I've just found out from these reports is that Marvin Rees, he's a brother, you know, he's the first African heritage mayor in Bristol, I think, or one of the first in modern times. He's, you know, made a statement which denies the involvement of African people in toppling the statue. And it sounds really strange, right? So the statue's there on the plinth, and behind it there's this plaque which you can see all this explanatory text. And what you know, Rhiannon Graham, who's one of the Coastal 4, tells us is that actually what he said is wrong, because he's saying that there were no African people, and the only people who were involved in bringing it down were Europeans. And if somebody who was so-called black had done it, would they have had the courage to do it, and would they come forward? And she's saying that actually, no, that's a distortion. There are people of all backgrounds pulling on the ropes, and they all had the courage to do what they felt was the right thing at that particular time. So it wasn't the case that the statue was just pulled down by 4 Europeans, which is what Marvin Rees is saying. And you can see the photograph, and if you've seen the footage, and obviously those who were there will know that it was a multi-ethnic group of people there. It's just that 4 people were picked upon for that trial. And I tend to agree with her. I think this is actually disingenuous, and it's quite dangerous to let this stand in the museum. She's going to try and work with the staff at the museum to improve displays and change that narrative. Because what it says then, it says that we were so scared, we were so passive, we were so kind of like compliant with the state narrative to stay indoors during lockdown, that even though you know, Black Lives Matter movement was calling for change, and we didn't do anything. And all the changes that led to, because of course the toppling of the Colston statue had international effect. It inspired, and it led to other community groups around the world engaging in decolonial protests and works. You know, so what Marvin Rees' statement says is I don't think it should stand. I think it should be corrected. I think, you know, and those comments, it's his opinion, but I don't think it should stand as an authority opinion. So that's just that story there. And it's interesting. I would, you know, this is probably the reason for this program, right? We'd never know. And again, it just shows the importance of actually, or the dangers of actually leaving museums to create history, even though the person writing is someone of African heritage. That's quite an interesting story. The next one, oh gosh. The next story is the Labour MP David Lammy, who's actually now the shadow foreign secretary, who has launched what he calls a personal defence of the Union flag. I'm not even, I mean, I wish this was satire, but it's not. So David Lammy wrote what he called a personal piece, not in a journal, not in The Voice, but in The Sun newspaper. And in The Sun newspaper, he's defending the use of the Union flag on the Labour campaign flyers. He's saying that it's fine because now that Labour has added the flag to their membership cards. In fact, I can't even make this up. You know, the far right leader, or the right wing leader of Britain First actually praises Labour Party for this action. So this is how it's gone, right? The Labour Party is now being praised by people who would formerly be called extremists. So writing in The Sun, Lammy has said that anyone complaining about the Union flag on Labour material had it wrong. It was the flag that went into battle against Hitler's racism, and abandoning it to racists is a betrayal of its anti-fascist heritage. And it's like, Lammy, for F's sake, Lammy. So, I mean, there's an image you can see of Empire and other places where the Union flag was paraded. You know, the Liverpool Community Independence Group, because you're probably familiar with the idea that Liverpool will not support the Sun. And the fact that Labour is now using the Sun to communicate with its potential voters and going back against a tradition of actually not supporting racist newspapers. The Liverpool Community Independence Group, which ironically was founded by former Labour members, said that when this country fought against Hitler's evil regime, it had an empire. And that was the epitome of racism itself, the British Empire. So it fought to defend the British Empire, not to fight racism. And they're making the point that Lammy is wrong in claiming that the Union was a symbol of anti-fascism. And they're right. The Union flag was used to justify colonialism. It was used to justify enslavement. And it just makes me sick to hear that, you know, Labour's supposed to be the opposition, right? This is Lammy. What can I say? I'm not even making this stuff up. Sister Oleander.
Yeah, Keith Hall puts it quite well here, saying you cannot get any more different from Bernie Grant to Lammy Kiss My Teeth.
Tell me about it. Yeah, thank you. So succinct and so on point. You know, Bernie, we miss him. And it's an insult, actually, that Lammy took that mantle and betrayed it in such an outrageous way. You know, if he loses his seat, you know, I'm not even going to go into that. That's Labour. That's the Labour approach, right? That we should all now drape the Union flag around us and say, yes, we are anti-fascist. And yes, Britain, the country, the British Empire was a force for good in the world. And that's Labour. Let's see what the other side is saying, the Tories. Because I don't know if you've heard this story, but Kemi Badenoch, and she's the UK's Minister for Business, she's running around the world telling everyone that actually Britain's wealth isn't from colonialism, it's not from white supremacy or privilege anyway, but it's from the glorious revolution of 1688, which paved the way for economic certainty because it led to the development of the UK's constitution, this unwritten constitution. It led to the solidification of the role of Parliament, which in itself led the way for the Industrial Revolution. That's what led to Britain's wealth. Nothing to do with white supremacy, nothing to do with colonialism. She doesn't even mention enslavement. She doesn't talk about Maarthur. She just talks about colonialism. And it's such a deceitful, disingenuous statement. I don't want to spend much time on it. I just want you to be aware of these are two African people who are actually parroting this revisionist narrative. They're part of the same revisionist movement. They might come in from a slightly different angle, but they're both denying the moral degradation of the British Empire. They're denying that profits from British imperialism and enslavement made the Union what it was, made us have to live in this space where institutional and racism and structural violence is the norm. Badenoch claims that this sort of stuff matters in other countries because if so-called developing nations do not understand how the West became rich, they cannot follow in its footsteps. And this patronizing comment that the rest of the world, the global South, should aspire to follow in the footsteps of the West. This is, you know, sometimes we shouldn't waste energy talking to these people. When they're out of power, just shun them, leave them. Sister Oleander.
Yeah, both of them insult themselves, but even worse, they insult our ancestors. It's just so disgusting. So N says Kemi is clearly a Negropean.
If the cat fits, I'm not going to say anything. Thank you for sharing. That view is, it is what it is. You know, and like I said, what I don't like us to do, and this is just strategic advice from Uncle Toyin. Idiot says something outrageous, there has to be some wisdom in us not responding and fueling it. This is how culture wars work. This is how we get distracted. So idiot says something outrageous and racist and Afrophobic, leave them. I remember my father telling me, he said, like, when you start arguing with an idiot, then what happens from a distance, people can't tell which one of you is the fool. So sometimes you just have to leave them because they want their attention. It's kind of like Suella Braverman. It's kind of like that what's that one with the mop on their head on GB News? Let them say what they say. We have work to do. We have other things. We have education to deal with. Let me move on. So I spoke about Badenoch. I've spoken about Lammy. So let's talk about Robert Jenrick, the Minister of State for Health. Now, for some reason, because obviously health is linked to culture in his mind, he's decided to open his mouth and flap his gums on the issue of restitution or the repatriation of cultural artifacts from museums back to their homes. And he's saying things like some of the works like the Parthian marbles. He doesn't use the term Parthian, he uses the colonial term Elgin marbles. But he said they would not have survived had they remained where they were. He says that the UK is a world-class space for displaying them, unlike many of those who want their artifacts returned. It's a slippery slope. And he claims that it's long-term loans are a legal fiction, and we shouldn't be. I say not we, but obviously museums shouldn't be honouring them, shouldn't be dealing with them, because clearly what will happen is that if the artifacts go back to their homes, go back to their legal owners, then they won't return them to the UK. And and I'm like, yeah, and what? You just shut your mouth. You're supposed to be Minister for Health. Deal with your Minister for Health business. Keep out of the cultural. You've got enough clowns doing that. We know that the British Museum has one of the largest collections of Benin bronzes in the world. They have over 900 pieces. And this idea that it's prohibited from removing items because of the British Museum Act, which was made in 1963, is just rubbish. If we have to use the doctrine of long-term loans to actually secure justice, then that's what should happen. If Ethiopia gets some of its work back in Jamaica, gets some of its artifacts back, then so be it. But let's not get caught up in this kind of madness, which these like I said, idiot flaps his gums. We don't always need to put a lot of energy into it. Sister Oleander.
Yes, we have a couple of greetings. The first one from FP Comms. Blessings to you, your family, and to all you love.
Greetings, Sister Nicola and FP Comms. Good to hear you, and to you too.
And from Reparation Nation, greetings.
Greetings, Reparation Nation. Good to see you still with us and doing the works. Okay. So, just as a heads up, you are watching Legali's Pan-African Community News Update. Just as a reminder, if you're watching live, you're welcome to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. We should be on all those platforms right now. As ever, don't forget to subscribe, to like, and to share if you find this broadcast useful. It's always helpful. If no one clicks like, then it doesn't kind of get traction, so no one can see it. And but the most important thing is that even if you don't like it, you don't want to subscribe, share it with anyone you find useful. That's fine for us. That's the most important thing. Anything you find useful, informative, friends, family, community, let them know. That's the whole purpose of the way Legali works. And this next section is a review of Afrophobia and related white supremacy news from around the UK. And we're covering everything, well, not everything, but we're covering a snapshot of some of the things that took place over the last 4 weeks while we've been off air. Okay, and I'm going to start with just a story about this former Labour councillor, George Rist, who has been suspended, or not suspended, he's been kicked out of Labour. I say kicked out, he wasn't kicked out, he actually resigned. I'll be quite accurate about that. But he has been sentenced for 2 criminal offences over his racist, Islamophobic rant. A staff member who worked at the King's Head in Monmouth last December. Now, like I said, he was a Labour councillor at the time before resigning from his role. He was a little bit leery. I think he'd had a bit of alcohol He was asked to kind of keep it down. It was around the whole Christmas time, blah blah blah. And then for some reason he decided to start challenging the doorman's nationality. And I'm not going to use all the language. He started using F and this and F and that. Is he F and what? He's black. He's from Somalia or Zimbabwe. You know what I mean? And he can't be British, or he can't. He just started all this kind of foolishness. And so it's good that he's been sentenced for it. And it's just a reminder, because the argument that he was making was, and if you're wondering why is Lammy on here, am I picking on Lammy this week? And I'm not really, but it's because Lammy and Rist were tied by this idea, this concept of what is so-called Black English. And when I read the story and the articles on Rist and his racist, Afrophobic, Islamophobic rant, it reminded me of Lammy's, kind of like talk with a caller, and on, I think it was LBC, of all the stations in all the world, and he asked me that the term Black British to be put in a census in a strategy that would enable the removal of African Caribbean heritage, which of course would mean that we would no longer be recognised as legal identities by the states. And people don't really think about that, right? If you go into the census and tick Black English instead of saying that you're of African or African Caribbean heritage, then all of a sudden it's like all the categories that you see around the country in all the institutions no longer allow you to actually remember that heritage. And generations down the line, you for some reason think that there's English, and then there's this Black English, this kind of deviant version of English. But Lammy was praised for this, and of course it's a good reminder that not all people in the Labour Party agree with him, and that's why I thought I'd share this image with this racist rant from former Labour councillor George Rist. The next story, we've been talking about statues, and so perhaps this is a positive in some ways. Last month, there's a replacement plaque was installed by Edinburgh's council, and it's put at the base of a controversial Melville monument that you can see in the image there. And this plaque was installed by the council following an independent review chaired by our elder Professor Jeff Palmer. And I say replacement plaque because the previous plaque was removed last September by a monument group that's led by the descendant of Henry Dundas, and that's who the statue is being erected to in his honour. It was erected in 1827. You can see the image of Dundas. Dundas was a slaver. He held up abolition. It's said that his activities during that era led to enslavement of many, many more African people. He's also been, investigated for fraud at the time and all kinds of stuff. Not someone that should be honoured, even though the statue's still up there. I actually personally don't even think the statue should be up there. I mean, the fact that there's a plaque to actually explain more of his history, and if you can read the text, if that the text gives you a bit more context, I'll put it there. It's probably not big enough, but the text gives you a bit more context of his misdeeds. But it's a reminder that this is still an ongoing issue, and the actions of Dundas in delaying the abolition of the trafficking of enslaved Africans is said to have resulted in the enslavement of an extra 500,000 African people. So, I mean, this is an ongoing issue. This is the actions of a council working with an independent reviewer, like I said, like Professor Jeff Palmer, and another group which is led by descendants of two factions fighting. And so, let's see if they remove this plaque and it goes tit for tat. An interesting development took place at the United Nations on March the 25th, which is a day that the UN marks as a day for remembrance of the victims of slavery. I think it's important to remember that our brother Kwaku, who runs BMC, makes a point that actually it shouldn't be called International Day for Remembrance of the Victims of Slavery. It should be remembering those who resisted enslavement and fought against it. And so we're remembering and honouring those who lost their life to enslavement, but not enshrining us as internal victims. We fought back, we resisted, and it's an important distinction that he makes with that, and people who support that do. But anyway, on the 25th of March, the United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres, who you can see in the image, called for reparations as a way of addressing its legacy, and its toxic legacy, I should say, which affects African people in today's world. And he includes addressing systemic racism, which is quite nice to hear someone at the head of the United Nations recognizing systemic racism as a thing that is a direct consequence of African enslavement. And it's important to remember, I'm not a historian, but historians do state that between the 15th all the way up to the 19th century, at least 12.5 million Africans were kidnapped, forcibly transported by European ships and enslaved in the Americas, mostly in Brazil and the Caribbean, while many, many others profited from their labor. So forget what Badenoch says. Academics, scholars, economists, or people who are kind of like got a couple of brain cells have already done this research and tell us that. There was a report last September by the UN that suggested countries should consider financial compensation to make up for their role in profiteering from African enslavement, which is probably what's led to Badenoch's statement. But yeah, this is an ongoing issue. So I just thought I'd share that news with you. This is Oleander.
Yes, we have a message from Keith Hoare saying the statue Dundas and all similar ones need to be Colstonized. And I assume he means, well, we know what he means.
You almost had water all over the camera just then. Yes, I like that. That's probably a good, to bring someone down, to bring him into disrepute. Yes, Colstonized. Thank you, I love that. And maybe using that in the future. So you might need to copyright that. Okay. Let's just deal with this ridiculous story. So a British overseas, or they say overseas territory, but if we're being honest, a British colonial territory. They just don't like to say colonial. It's not an overseas territory. A British colonial territory, St. Helena, is being urged to remain or to return the remains of over 300 formerly enslaved Africans to their ancestral homes in on the continent, or potentially face legal action. And this is it's difficult to believe that this stuff is still going on, but what's happened, just so you know the backstory, the remains of our ancestors were excavated in 2008 when there was a project of, they were building an access road for a new airport, and they found their bodies. This island in the South Atlantic Ocean is called St. Helena. There was a plan that was drawn up. This plan was for a dignified reburial and a memorialization. However, despite the government of St. Helena endorsing the plan, there was also an appointee of the UK Foreign Office who came to say that this was a good plan. They've actually failed to honour it. Surprise, surprise. And the plan's co-authors, that's Anina Van Neel and Peggy King Jordan, say, look, you need to follow this plan which you agreed to, or we're going to have to look into legal action. What can I say? I mean, this is one of the reasons why we use the term Ma'afa, because this island is not in the Caribbean. This is, just so you know the history of this. What used to happen was that when the British said that they were engaging in abolition, they weren't, the 1807 Act wasn't an abolition of slavery, as they tried to make you believe. It was so-called abolition of the trafficking of enslaved Africans. And so the British made a new business where they went around attacking the ships of their economic rivals. So in this case, it was the Portuguese. They'd go into the sea because they had a superior navy at that time, and they would attack those ships, take the Africans off those ships, and instead of returning them to their homes, they would take them to St. Helena, this colonial territory, where they would actually be imprisoned and interned, and later on involved in labor. So the whole point was not to free them. They say they freed them, but they didn't free them. And as you can see in the image, this is why it's difficult to have a distinction between colonial enslavement and transatlantic enslavement, because even during that period of abolition, the British were actively, under the banner of the Union flag, were actively still re-enslaving freed Africans. Another thing, I won't go into the details of this story, but you might want to research as well. I also found out that a giant 170-year-old lizard is due to be returned to Jamaica by a Scottish university in a repatriation first. And this is due to a partnership between the University of Glasgow and the University of the West Indies, UWI. And I don't know if you can see that how sick this is, that actually a university can actually return a lizard, but there's no way to return human bodies so they can actually have a proper burial. There's no way to actually reburial them and have a memorial. A lizard has more value in exchange than human bodies. This is what dehumanization is, where our ancestors, even in death, they're being insulted. It's a horrible story, but again, we have to be aware of these kind of things and understand the arguments and what's taking place around it, so we have a sense of the context of these kind of situations. Yeah. Okay. This story you might be familiar with. Meet one Conservative MP, Richard Drax. Richard Drax is allegedly worth something. When I say he's worth, he has assets of £150 million. And the story went out that he was going to get a £3 million payout from the government of Barbados from the sale of his family forced enslavement camp. They call them plantations, but they're forced enslavement camp. And this was the deal. There was quite an uproar. Now, even though the Bajan government wanted to use it to build homes because of the big demand for new builds in Barbados, people were angry that someone could still profiteer directly from the legacy of African enslavement. And so the Prime Minister, Mia Mottley, who has been a superstar when it comes to the topic of reparations and African dignity recently, leading her nation to become a republic, she paused that process, and now there's a public consultation. I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but we're just hoping that he will not be able to profiteer from the sale of his ill-gotten inheritance. And let's hope this is not just some idea of kind of like mollycoddling the Beijing community, because Bajans are very angry about this. It's not just us in the diaspora who are very angry about this. Bajans are very angry with this move. So for those people who say this is in the past, what has slavery got to do with now? Here you have a direct example of how someone who's inherited the proceeds of this crime against humanity, this heinous deed of Ma'afa, and was about to make £3 million from it. You can't get a better example. Direct link between it. He's already rich and wealthy. The whole family. In fact, I think three generations of his family has been in British Parliament. So when people say there's no link, 3 generations have been in British Parliament. He's a Conservative MP currently. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Okay, the next story is one more about Afrophobia than, even though, of course, Afrophobia does have links to white supremacy. This one's more about Afrophobia. And our sister, Francesca Anwada Rivers, she's been cast in a Romeo and Juliet play. And the moment it was announced, she faced a ridiculous, torrent of racist abuse, of Afrophobic abuse. And her theatre company, the Jamie Lloyd Theatre Company, they put out a statement condemning this abuse. And the debate's been raging over social media, saying like, why is an African woman, being cast in this role? Blah 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 blah. I'm not even going to go into the hypocrisy and the stupidity of those who made the argument, who don't understand the history of Shakespeare's work and Othello, etc. There's been this massive argument. I think Tobey Maguire is playing. Is it Tobey Maguire? It's one of the Spider-Man actors who's playing Romeo. One of the nice things that's happened, I say nice, it shouldn't have had to happen, is that there's been an open letter that's been signed by 800 performers who are speaking in solidarity with her after she was targeted online. Again, this talks to the topic we discussed over a month ago with the blackout nights. I don't know if you remember when the office of the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, came out and condemned blackout nights, saying that there was no need for safe spaces for actors of African heritage in the theatre. And that such an act would be kind of like racism in reverse or some kind of nonsense like this. Again, we can see why there's a need for safe spaces, why there needs to be kind of like resources put into addressing institutional and systemic racism in British society. But this is the story. She's got solidarity. She's protected. Let's hope that she stays safe, and that the theatre company and the spaces that she's working actually has adequate security provisions up to make sure that she's not harmed and that she has sufficient access to counselling resources just in case she needs them. Sticking with theatre land, the next story is, again, it's almost like the Lammy case, right? I mean, this is just one of those strange things. You see these actors on our screens and you kind of respect them because they play these great roles. You respect their talent, and you kind of like start to project the dignity of the roles they're playing with the actor that's playing it. But that's not always the case. Not every actor that plays a fantastic role or plays a role that inspires us is actually a good, decent human being. Now, I don't know much about David Harwood's background. I mean, I know as an actor, he's played many roles. I know he's had many challenges. He's faced racism. I think he's had issues with depression and mental health abuse, and and I support his courage to stand up and talk about these kind of things and to be a role model for others. But on this particular issue, and if you're not aware of this, David Harwood came out and actually said that actors should be able to do anything, including using the I don't know if you know I don't even like saying the word blackface to portray African characters. He came out promoting this and saying this, and he spoke it with his chest, right? Like, actors should be able to do anything, even blackface. And I kind of get what he's saying, because in many ways, the story we just spoke about is an African woman playing another role. But that's not what blackface is. And this is the problem, right? David Harwood made a documentary about blackface. Blackface is a grotesque caricature. It's grotesque of African identity. It's Afrophobia, in the most horrendous form. And he knows this because he made a documentary about this. He came out with a statement of his chest, and thankfully there was a massive response, outrage to this nonsense that he said. And he's backtracked, which is good, and credit to him. And he's now acknowledged that blackface is actually the wrong thing to do. I don't think he would have actually done that if there wasn't this outrage, if there wasn't this backlash, which is quite disappointing. The reason why I am worried about this, though, is because you may remember is that our brother is actually now the new president of the drama school RADA. Now, RADA stands for Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, and in 2020, RADA admitted it was institutionally racist. So what I'm now starting to worry about is if he's the new president of RADA and he holds these kind of views and only takes an ethical position when there's outrage, when there's pushback, is he the right person for that job? Because dealing with institutional racism is not no joke business. You've got to stand firm. You've got to believe something and push against it, because the pushback is strong. And he's already demonstrated that he could say something with his chest and then fly in the wind. And, we'll see. But I'm very worried about this. I don't want to attack someone I don't know personally, but he shouldn't have said that. It's good that he's backtracked and he's corrected it. But is he the right president? I don't know. We'll see. We'll judge him. Maybe this is a learning lesson for him. But I know RADA hasn't substantially changed, and that that statement he made in 2020 still holds true now. I know people who have been through RADA, who have been to RADA and come through that process, and they tell me about the racism that they experience. And I'm talking about as recently as this year. So let's watch this space. Okay. Whew. Wow. So you are watching Legali's Pan-African Community News Update. There's a lot to go through. If you're watching live, as ever, thank you for being with us. Hopefully you're still with us. I hope you haven't all logged off and we're just Oleander and I all by ourselves. But you are welcome to interact with us through Facebook, through YouTube, through Twitter, just to say hi. Let us know you're still with us. And actually, if you're not in the UK, also let us know where you're listening from. Sometimes, in fact, at all different spaces, sometimes it's nice to know where our reach is as well. But please let us know that you can hear us and you're okay, you're with us. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share if you find this broadcast useful. I'm not trying to depress you, I'm not trying to upset you. The news, unfortunately, in the UK isn't always great when it comes to issues, Pan-African issues. This next section is going to look at some of the policing-related stories affecting our community over the past few weeks. I can't cover 4 weeks worth of news, so we're only going to cover a few, but it'll give you a snapshot of what's taking place. Okay, so let me get started. So the first story is it a good story? Is it a bad story? I don't know. So the Metropolitan Police is going to pay out, and it's reputed to be a sum in the millions, to a young man named Jordan Walker Brown. He's 27 years of age, and he was left paralyzed from the chest down after he was tasered by PC Imran Mahmood. This happened during the first COVID lockdown in May 2020. He was running away from the police because they, I don't know all the insides, but they incorrectly believed he might have a knife. He was left with a broken back after he fell over a fence. This was after he was tasered. I think the image has gone. It's a strange one. Let me put it back on. Now, there was a trial. PC Mahmood was cleared of grievous bodily harm. Is that right? GBH, as we say back in the day. But Walker, our brother, Jordan Walker Brown, also sued the police for compensation, and it looks like they may have won. So we're going to find out more information, or we hope. We don't know if it's going to be sealed. Compensation can't make up for his paralysis, even if it's millions. That's why I said I don't know if it's good news, but I mean, it's something to be aware of. Even if you've got £1 million, if you've got £10 million, not being able to walk, being in a wheelchair, it doesn't, it's done. But what's worthy of note, and you can see in the bottom image, I've put the image on the screen, so you can see how he was, you can see how he is now. This is the image of when he was shot. And this is partly the reason why there is going to be some kind of compensation. The reason why, even though Mahmood was cleared of GBH, which is outrageous, if you can see the distance between our brother and the police officer, it was caught on camera. And so even, he said that he believed that Jordan was going to attack him with a knife. But you can see in that image that he's actually trying to climb over a fence. He's nowhere near him. So how on earth could he have posed a threat to him in that circumstance? And this is why I worry about us not having footage. This is why it's so important for us when we see situations to record them on our phones, because we cannot trust the police and their body-worn cameras to secure the evidence. I don't know where this footage came from. Could be from his one, but we have to always make sure that we have footage, because he blatantly lied. And even though he lied, even though he said that Jordan was about to attack, he was still cleared. He was still cleared of GBH. So I'm just sharing the news. Haven't worked out how I feel about this, because it's, like I said, money can't make up for paralysis for the rest of your life. But there's things, I was about to say that political term, right? There are things to learn from this. Sorry about that. Okay, what else is there to learn from all of this stuff? Well, I'm going to keep this brief. What we have learned from a piece of research that just recently was being conducted out of the data was collected from 41 out of 43 police forces across the UK, and we found out that there was over 3,000 searches carried out on under 18s in the year to March 2023. So thousands of children have been strip searched, and these are intrusive searches, the most intimate type of searches, some of them as young as 10 years of age. Those who were targeted, not all of them, but a disproportionate amount of them, well, as you're probably going to be not surprised to learn, were of African heritage, Asian heritage, and a dual heritage. And they are significantly more likely to be targeted. And this, you know, it probably invokes the child Q scenario. I wish I could say that that's no longer taking place and that young children as young as 10 are not being intimately searched by police officers. I know that the police have put, or the Metropolitan Police at least, have put in more controls, making sure that, you know, you're not being searched by someone of a different opposite gender and all these kind of things. But this just shouldn't happen whatsoever. The Home Office is arguing that this is a tactic that's needed because, you know, young people are being used to transport weapons and drugs, etc. But this is just so wrong in so many ways. I think if you can look at the data map on the image, Suffolk is the place where the most intimate searches of children is taking place. But we just need zero tolerance for this kind of approach. But that's the story. This month or this week, I'm going to leave the news on policing at that. I'm going to move to the next section, which is about health. As ever, you are watching the Gaddy's Pan-African Community News Update. And you're always welcome to interact. I'm just going to go through the news just to keep the time short because I can see it where, you know, this is an extended program and I'm trying to cover as much news as I can in as short space time as possible. So there has been a report published last month by the NGO Global Black Maternal Health in partnership with Black Sen Mamas. And they looked at the experiences of parents and professionals in accessing SEND provision. And what they've discovered is that there are cultural barriers which are preventing children of African heritage who are autistic or have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, that's ADHD, from accessing the help that they need. Now, you can see the image of Marsha Martin. She's the founder of a campaign calling for better support. You know, and she's saying that, you know, there's stigma in asking for help, and, you know, when help eventually does come, often it's too late. Often problems have arisen from this, and that hundreds of children with special educational needs are routinely having to wait for more than a year to get support from local authorities across England. And this is only getting worse. There's an incredible need that's unprecedented that is present in this dire financial climate. I don't know what else I can say on this. I mean, our sister talks about a stigma within our community that prevents issues from being discussed. We have to discuss SEND. We have to discuss these issues. And I say that because if you think it just ends at accessing help for you know, children in schools, it goes beyond that. If we start to look at exclusion figures across the UK, then we can see that often there's a correlation between those of us from minority communities and those of us with special educational needs who are being routinely excluded, and sometimes permanently excluded or sent to PRUs. And from the moment we're on that trajectory, we tend to end up in the criminal justice system. There's a pathway, a direct pathway to the criminal justice system. And the life chances are severely diminished for those children. So if we are thinking about, and we should be thinking about, no more exclusions, there's an amazing activist group, No More Exclusions, who work on these kind of issues, then we have to think about it as early as back to when we find out that some of our children need help. And even though there might be some stigma, there might be some taboos talking about it, we have to provide them with help. This applies not just to special educational needs, but also to mental health needs. Sister Oleander.
And also to children with disabilities.
Of
So
course.
children who have sickle cell, for example, I mean,
Yes.
it's no wonder that their parents or their adults with sickle cell face stigma. So of course it goes the same for children who face stigma as well. So
Yeah.
it's very very important to remember the disabled children out there who are going through an awful lot, as well as those who've got physical disabilities. So we must remember them.
Thank you for that reminder. It's very important, because, and I like the fact you said that they are disabled, because it is the system that's disabling them. In the case of sickle cell, as we obviously know, in our family situation, it's like having a crisis, and having frequent crises can actually impact on your attendance. And so, sometimes having poor attendance, if you've had a particular time, like a season, where crises have happened because of weather conditions or whatever reasons, if schools are not responsive to that and providing support for that, then children are again shoved into a pathway that can be very harmful for them, and that diminishes their life chances. So yes, it is any kind of situation where children are being disabled by a lack of understanding, and of course parents feeling stigmatized and taboo to talk about these issues, and actually just calling for help. That calling for help is actually important. So the more we talk about these kind of issues, the better. There is no shame in having ADHD. There's no shame in having sickle cell, for example. There's no shame in having any kind of special educational need, or being disabled in any kind of way. So yeah, thank you. It's an important story. And just to make that point clear in this very, very tragic way, some of you may have seen this on the news, and I'm going to close this section on health with this one. The media focused on the anger of the parents. There was a coroner's court which had an investigation into the death of a schoolgirl, Victoria Olabode, and she passed away from a stroke. Now, the coroner said that it was natural causes. There's insufficient evidence to say what caused her passing. The mother, I think, who was in the court, was outraged, and the family kind of like had an outburst, and the police were called to them. Now, Victoria, it was 12 years of age, and I had to be very careful with my word taker. I don't know all the facts, but what we do know is that she had sickle cell. We know that she went to hospital having a crisis. She was in pain. We know that she passed away in the Royal Manchester's Children's Hospital in 2019 after having a stroke. And the reason why the family are so outraged, and the reason why when they heard that conclusion of natural causes, they were so angry, and including her twin brother. I mean, the whole family is traumatized by this. Is because she was transferred to that hospital after being at the North Manchester General Hospital 13 days earlier. Now, what happened after she'd been admitted? Our young princess developed a severe headache and began vomiting. Now, she was treated for her pain at that time, which is normal with sickle cell, but her mother persistently asked for a CT scan. She said, something is not right. I need a CT scan to be carried out. And they did not do this. They would not heed that concern. And it wasn't until July the 8th, what I mean? So this, you've got to remember, she went in June, and we're talking about weeks afterwards when they finally gave the scan. But by then she'd suffered prolonged seizures. And this eventually resulted in what they call brain stem death. And at that point, they pull away all the food and everything. And she's dead. So the family is outraged by this. Now, we don't have all the information. And of course, the coroner says there's not insufficient evidence to say that the delay by hospital staff in carrying out the scan contributed to her death. And I don't know. I haven't seen the reports. I wasn't there. But what I do know is that as parent of children with sickle cell or any condition, is that we become experts on our children's condition. We live with them. They live with us. We know them. And if we're saying that this is abnormal, this is not normal, this is something different happening, and you need to check for this, then it becomes incumbent on the medical staff to trust us. And I know that CT scans are expensive, but her instinct, the mother's instinct, was powerful then. And, you know, like I said, I can't say that the scan would have changed the outcome, but it might have. They might have seen something in the treatment that they gave could have been different. And so this is kind of the thing. It's us who are caring parents, who are the carers, who know our children's ailments. And of course, the children themselves, because they live with that condition all their lives. And when, I know I'm going off my soapbox and I apologize for this, but what I'm saying is that when clinicians, and of course I know clinicians are trying to do their best, you know, medical staff are not trying to harm the children in that particular situation, but when they're just going by the book and they're thinking one size fits all, and it does not work like that, that's when these things can happen. So, you know, I feel for that family and I can understand their pain. I'm sorry. It's just a horrible thing to read. But it's just something we have to be aware about. We cannot allow stigma. We can't allow these cultural problems, these taboos to prevent us from discussing and sharing experiences and tactics to make sure that these kind of outcomes don't occur. It's really important that we share everything that we know amongst ourselves and set up peer-to-peer support groups so that when we do go into hospital, that we, you know, or our children go into hospital, or when our children are in treatment, that we can support them properly. But that's another issue. It's not taking the blame of the system. You know, if that CT scan was carried out when the mother asked for it, there is a possibility that Victoria would be alive. We don't know that, but there's a possibility. We don't know that for sure, but it could have been done. I'm going to leave that there because this is a very sensitive topic, and I don't want to muddy the waters. Okay, this is the last on the health section, and this is the last section for this program. This is what I say. This is our being positive section. For those of you who are joining very late, you are watching Legali's Pan-African Community News Update. This is the best time to join the program in many ways if you don't want to hear of some of the negativity, unfortunately, that takes place. But you know, if you're watching live, it's your last chance to interact with us through Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. You can send us a message. We're going to close in a few minutes. And if you haven't done so, don't forget to subscribe, to click like, and tell your friends, family, share it with them if you find the broadcast useful. And I'm going to go over a few positive news stories relating to our community from over the past 4 weeks. I can't cover everything. We've already run for almost 90 minutes. The program's supposed to be an hour long, so I'm really going to try and get through these quickly. Like I said, this is a snapshot. We can't cover everything. We wish we could. I know so many more stories, especially in all those fields that we've been talking about, which I've had to just kind of like move to one side. Their exclusion does not mean that they're not important. It's just trying to get a picture for us as a community of where we are at the state of play. So looking at the positive stories, let's start off with, and I say positive even though it comes from tragedy, that the family and friends of Folajimi Olubunmi Adewale are trying to set up an annual day in his honour. Now, for those of you who aren't unfamiliar with his name, in 2021, he jumped into the Thames, I think it was the Thames? Yeah, I think it was the Thames, after a woman fell from London Bridge and shouted that she could not swim. He jumped in to try and save her. The police came, they pulled his body from the river, but he passed away. He saved the woman, from what I recall. Now, there's a plaque there at Cathedral Square in Suffolk, which marks the place where he actually jumped into the river, but now the family are trying to have an annual day, asking people to focus on selfless actions and helping others. So it's not actually just asking to call out people who do that, but actually asking everyone to think about what can I do on the 24th of April every year that's selfless, that can help someone else. And I think that's a lovely idea, a lovely tribute, and I thought I'd share that as a positive thing to focus on for the 24th of April next year when it comes up. The next story is again coming from tragedy, and I had to apologise that they're coming from tragedy. Not all the stories are going to come from tragedy in this section, but it's also good to recognise that we can actually transform these circumstances. Now, what's happened is that some of Bristol's biggest names in music have contributed to the No Justice EP to Marlon Thomas. Now, I spoke about Marlon Thomas right in the front of the programme when I spoke about the uprising in St Paul's, Bristol. Now, the EP has been put together by Marlon's brother, who's a singer. Marlon's brother's not a singer. I think he might be a DJ, but also by singer-songwriter Rudy Lee. And it features members from the legendary Bristol music pioneers, Smith and Mighty. I grew up with them. Anyone who had a heart, and they were amazing at the time, among others. Now, Marlon's brother Rudy said the attack has left him severely disabled and totally dependent on others for all his physical needs. He had 24 hours daily attention. He was only a teenager at the time. He is wheelchair bound, unable to speak or to alert for assistance. His vision is impaired, and he is fed through a tube inserted into his stomach. I'm not going to go through the attack and what happened. If you are interested in the detail, just type in Marlon Thomas or Justice for Marlon Thomas. There is a website, community website up there, and it explains the circumstances of how he was attacked. I said it was very much like Stephen Lawrence. It's a horrific case, and those who attacked him, they were done for GBH, if I remember correctly, as opposed to murder. And so they I think they got off with a couple of years. It's a horrendous situation. So the No Justice EP tribute is still keeping that message alive, and still, I think there's fundraising to try and help Marlon. The good news, of course, he's still alive, but his quality of life, obviously, it's completely been shattered, and his family are still doing everything they can to look after him. And like I said, I'm not sure this is positive news, but I like the fact that people are coming together to celebrate him and support him. Okay, more easier to categorize in this section is the tale of a father and son duo from Peckham, who are known for serving homemade Jamaican patties to their local community, who have won a Channel 4 competition, meaning that their products, which are authentic patties, will be making their way to supermarket shelves. And I think it's Aldi. They won some competition on Channel 4. I didn't see the program. Their company called Flake Bake was launched in 2012. Mike's dad bought some retail unit housing the original bakery, which he worked in when he moved from Jamaica in the 1990s. And since then, they've sold over 6 million patties. So it's a lovely story, and let's hope that their products spread further and further. I know the images of a beef patty, and as a vegetarian, I'm hoping they've got some vegetarian options. Even, I know for others, they might want some ackee and saltfish patties. But this is good news. They won the competition, and it's kind of like an alternative Dragon's Den thing, right? Kind of like getting the message out there. So I thought I'd share that one with you. And I spoke about Aldi just now, but another good news story, and just as a reminder, is that we want to move away from having to rely on the goodwill of Channel 4 or Aldi, and actually support ourselves and our own. And in this particular case, I want to say congratulations to the founders of Doha, which is the UK's newest African Caribbean superstore in Manchester. I think it's based in the Lime Street Retail Park. Now, the shop is the idea of in-laws turned business partners, Bukola Ario and Oladayo Olanrayaju. I hope I pronounced those Yoruba names correctly, seeing I'll be embarrassing myself if I haven't. And they have aspirations to play in the big leagues. They say they want to be the big African Asda. Why not? That's their ambition. So they've opened up this store, DOA, which is the name of their store, which means direct out of Africa. It officially opened on February the 17th, but they've steadily grown in popularity thanks to word of mouth. And I'm hoping that you continue to do that as well. The help of prominent social media accounts. I think they call them influencers, kind of like pushing the message out there. And also because they've been promoting local community-owned businesses in Manchester, and I love that. So it's not just them opening up their own superstore, but they're using it to promote businesses from our community. So let's hope that they do grow, and that they've got this branch, and they have another branch, and it grows, and then finally we can keep finance circulating within our community and engage in ethical businesses. So we can be careful about the products that we buy and actually use the power of bulk buying to keep the prices low for our community. So congratulations, well done. The next story makes me quite nostalgic, actually. And this one, it's a very simple one, actually. Some of you will know that I'm not on social media that much. I do have a Twitter and an Instagram and a Facebook account, but my time doesn't allow me to be on those platforms. In fact, I don't actually particularly like being on those platforms, if I'm really honest with you. The toxicity kind of upsets my spirit. But on Twitter, one of the people that I follow, if that's the right term, is a sister journalist called Melissa Sigodo. And I think she writes, is it the Daily Mirror she writes for? I think it is. But either way, she's an amazing community journalist. And there's a few on there who do some great work for our community. And she's actually just put together a platform, an online platform of weekly stories. So it comes out once a week. I think she releases it on a Friday. I was out of the country this Friday, so I hadn't had a chance to read it. But weekly stories covering issues affecting African, Asian and Arab communities in the UK. So it's not just kind of like our community. It is minority ethnic communities. And I just wanted to big it up because essentially, in many ways, it reminds me of the Legally newsletter, how, we used to do a monthly newsletter. And what, I think at the height, we did it every fortnight. We did a monthly newsletter where we collected all the stories, kind of like what we're doing now, but we're doing it in a slightly different format where we had analysis and interviews and articles and stuff like that. And of course, over the years, you see me get grayer and older. Organizations are a little smaller, more focused on what we do and how we do things. And so for me, it's kind of like beautiful to see this. It's almost like a spiritual passing the baton on to the next generation. And I haven't had a conversation with her. I haven't discussed this. I haven't suggested it. She's just done it. And for me, that it's kind of like a positive step of our community. For me, it shows, have faith in our young people, have faith in them, because the whole idea that there's a gap. The supermarket is a great idea. Like I said, that supermarket story is another great positive one, that there are those around us who people talk down our community, especially young people in our community, that younger generation, see them as kind of like oh, they're always on social media, they're all triggered so easily and stuff like that. But actually, there are many, people out there who are actually just silently getting on with the work. So I think you can go to a website. It's called The Thread. Just support her. That's all I'm going to say. And if you have an idea like this and you want to do something that supports our community, just get up and do it. I know I'm making it sound like it's really easy, and it's not. But the options are really simple. And that's how I say it. It's how Legally is always run. You either get up and do it yourself if you can, if you've got the network. You normally just need one or two other people to work with to make it work. It's always good to have a couple of people, so it's not you by yourself. So do it yourself. If you can't do it yourself, then look for someone else who's doing something similar and support them. That's it. Just don't do nothing. That's the third option. Don't just do nothing and moan, oh, we need to have this. We need, we're not like the Asian community. We're not like the Jewish community. Look at forget those deficit narratives. Do it yourself and find other people to build it and grow it, or support others who are doing it. That's a really important message I hope you take from this. And like I said, for me, it's quite nostalgic. It can make me tearful. But, I keep seeing new young organizations, and they have a different skill set than us. The same, I remember the most embarrassing thing for me happened a couple of years ago where, I remember my son was doing an event. He'd done some work with a Stormzy's imprint. I forgot what the book was called. He's got the publishing imprint, and he was talking at this event and stuff. So I went there just to support my son. I was in the background, and he did this amazing presentation, and everyone was clapping and stuff like that. I was just a proud daddy, And so I'm standing there, and like, and I'm giving him a hug when he comes back, and then his friends, my son's friends, come up to me and says, "Oh my God, you're Nate's, well, you're Nate's dad, blah blah blah. We've heard about you. You're toying around." And I said, "Well, I'm just, daddy today. That's it." So and then a couple of them came up to me, and it was almost embarrassing for me. I got to admit, they said to me, "Are you an Insta?" I said, "Insta? I don't think I had an Insta account at the time. I mean, I do now, but I mean, I don't like those platforms. I don't like using them." And I said, "Are you an Insta?" I said, "Well, I'm not sure. I mean, I might have an account, but I haven't used it, whatever." He says, "You need to be on it." I said, "But I don't have the time to be on all these platforms. There's too many of them." He said, "No, man. It's like, respect, uncle. We need you on it because this is how we get our news." It's like, I mean, suppose now it'd be TikTok, even though the US is about TikTok. This is how we get our information. We need you. We need you on there. We need you to share this information. We need you to communicate, blah, blah, blah. You can't be using Facebook. That's one thing. But for us young people, this is where we're hearing our news from. And I'm, if I'm honest, I did feel embarrassed. And I'm still embarrassed because I still haven't really engaged with Insta. I just taking photos of myself. It's difficult. Even this is difficult for me. I come off a plane, I'm sitting in, I'm researching, reading, writing, and I'm having to talk to you. And it's uncomfortable for me. I'm used to doing it now because I've been doing it for a couple of decades. And it's like I said, we need it. So it's the only reason why I do it. There's not a massive following. I don't have 1 million subscribers, whatever. That's not why I do it for. I just do it because we need it. Oh God, I can hear myself going on. I sound like a granddad, right? Okay. Anyway, like I said, 3 options. Do it yourself, and that means finding a couple of people to work with, even one other person, so you're just not alone. 3 people is optimum, minimum of 3 people. Support someone who's doing it if you can't do it yourself. That's really important. And that means, supporting them through time or supporting them with donations. But the 3rd option of doing nothing, put that in the bin. We don't have the luxury of that. Don't be moaning. We don't have that luxury of that. Choose whatever it is you want to do. Sister Oleander, if that's you coming to tell me to shut up, I'm hearing you.
Just very briefly, please. FPCom says, can I also shout out a channel on YouTube that are promoting Black Love UK, a movement to highlight the work of Black families and couples?
Oh, yes, please. Do you have their name? Because I will subscribe to them straight after the program. Please share the name.
I think isn't that the name she's saying, Black Love UK?
Oh, they're called promote.
Okay, capitals. I was assuming that was the name of it.
Okay, so that's fine. Look at one, Black Love UK.
Yeah, and then also she says it is great to see so many Black UK platforms emerging for controlling our own narrative.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
and lastly, she says, embrace the love, Brother Toyin. You've been doing the work and have given so many of us the courage to move forward.
Well, thank you. I mean...
Yeah, anyway, let's move swiftly on so that we
let's move swiftly on.
Up.
Yeah, I do actually blush. So, okay, so the next story is in the same line of the previous story of our sister Melissa. And this one is, again, there's a new school being set up, a journalism school for children of African heritage. It's called the Coco School of Journalism and Creative Arts, and it opened this April. And it just aims to inspire and nurture children of all ages who are interested in news journalism, podcasting, story writing. It's just a simple but brilliant initiative. It's been launched by Selena Boyd. She's the founder of Coco Girl. I think we spoke about that, which is the first girl magazine specifically for children of African heritage. And she just believes it's time to shake up the British media industry. And I think she's right. I mean, so essentially, it's like, we have journalists. We need journalists that work inside the media institutions. So having people who are independent. I think, Nadine White is amazing. She works in independent. We have people who, I'm not going to name everyone. We have people in independent. We have people in the Guardian. We have people on Channel 4. We have people on ITV and there's so many. But we also need to have our own networks. The whole point of Legali was actually do for self as well. It was kind of like having our own alternative news platforms. And so we need schools. Part of the reason why I actually went into the academy is so that I can actually bring and create some form of quasi-university, which is free to access. It's still the long-term plan. But of course, there's a balance between kind of like, my plan and me becoming an ancestor. And the time is quickly, catching up on me, and my energy is catching up on me. So this is a really good initiative, and we need more like this. So it's not just kind of replicating the new institutions that we need. We also need to replicate the schools, the colleges, the universities, the learning spaces, the grounding sessions that nurture another generation to take up that mantle. And that means we have to be inside the system, outside the system, sharing between the system. And do you know what I mean? So that we know how best to tell our own narrative. This makes me think there's a story, a positive thing I hadn't put on today's one. There's a series of events going on in Hackney. And thank you, Brother Etienne, for sharing with me. I completely forgot to put it on. There's so many things I've missed off this month's program. There's a series of events about resistance and art and culture in Hackney. I think if you go to the Hackney Archives website, you might be able to find there's a festival of different type of programs of what our elders did, what some of our ancestors did when we were so under attack that we had to create those institutions. We had to. Sometimes as we become more comfortable, we start to rely on the mainstream, and the mainstream always bites us on the bum. No matter how much we think, we've arrived, we've done it, and we should never get that comfortable. The mainstream always does something to remind us, actually, no, we can dehumanize you just like that. We can drop you just like that. You can say something that we disagree with, and we can just cut you down just like that. So we have to always have that network, that backup, and that backup must eventually become the front, and then everyone else comes behind us. Anyway, this is a wonderful story. I'm going to move on. I do know that our sister is looking to hire media professionals from our community to help teach and run some of the workshops. So, if that's you, get in contact with her, see how you can support her. But yeah, a great initiative, positive story. This one is not based in the UK, this story, but it's just a reminder that change can happen. I don't think it will come through Labour. I don't think it will come through the Tories, obviously. But France's lower house of Parliament has actually approved a bill that would ban workplace discrimination based on hair texture. And of course, this is a form of discrimination that targets women of African heritage. I mean, that's what's being used, right? Hair discrimination. Now, there are problems. I mean, the lower house in France approved the law. I think it was 44 in favour of only 2 against. And, if it becomes law, it'll become illegal to discriminate against people because of their hair, whether it's their texture, the length, the colour, or the style. But it's a draft law at this stage in France, and it faces a vote in the Senate. And this is where the Conservatives, who are extreme in France right now, just like in America, just like in the UK, they still have a majority. And so that the vote's outcome is much less certain. But it's important to keep a lookout on those kind of things. I came back from a workshop in Amsterdam. I work legally, and IPAD organisation I'm part of, work with an organisation called ENA, the European Network Against Racism. So I, visited The Hague. So went to the ICJ. I mean, obviously it was closed because it was a weekend, the International Court of Justice. But it's important to see what's going on around us, even within Europe. For a long time, I didn't keep my eye on what was happening in Europe, but there's different things we can learn and different strategies that we can use to our advantage to protect community. They're focused on anti-racism, but they recognise Afrophobia. I want to thank ENAR actually for the work that they've been doing over the years, and all the groups that made my stay there most welcome and edifying. I learned a lot through that. But this is what's happening in France. African people across the European continent are we're catching hell everywhere. The UK, as bad as it is, there are spaces where some of the tales I learned that's affecting us horrify me, from Italy to, we're catching hell everywhere. And so bit by bit, we have to kind of put pressure on those who represent us in Parliament, those who represent us in the workplace, and to do things like this. In America, these bills are far more common, but in the UK, they try and push back against it. So I just thought that's a good news story. Let's hope it passes that vote. I'm not 100% confident, but it's just something to let you know of that you should be aware of as well. While we are focused, what's that saying as an activist? Think global, act local. So always think about what's happening to us all over the world, from whether it's Haiti, Sudan, whether it's Paris, whether it's Eritrea, wherever it is, but we act in the space where we're at. And the last piece of news, it's got an international vibe on it, but it does relate to the UK, and it's the reason why it's in this section, is the United Nations General Assembly adopted a historic resolution in December 2013. And that's the one that declared the 2015 to 2024 as the International Decade for People of African Descent. And that's what the IDPAD Empowerment Centre that I run is, or I'm part of running, I should say, is named after. Now, it's 2024, and December 2024, that decade finishes. And we can see that in that decade, Britain, when it was asked by many people, what are you going to do to support us, and what are you going to do to celebrate and to uplift African people, Britain at the time when it was launched said nothing, and true to its word, it has done nothing. In fact, Britain has actually issued the Creed report, which Tony Sewell produced, which claimed that there was no institutional racism in the UK, and that Britain was an exemplar. It was an example for all nations around the world about how to have an institutional racism-free society. So we need another decade, and we need to really push hard on this. So Guyana is another nation that's actually joined the global call for the United Nations to proclaim a second International Decade for People of African Descent. And they did this at the opening of a session of the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent, which took place in Geneva in Switzerland. And I want to say big up June, who I saw recently in Amsterdam. She was part of the delegation. And and our sister, the Duchess of Brixton, who spoke about patois and linguistic discrimination. I know she made a presentation there as well. A lot of us are actually agitating internationally as well as domestically. And I just thought to let you know that there has been this continuous movement for the extension of a decade. And it's hoped that it will run from 2025 to 2034. So the good news is that it's not over yet, and we need to keep our eye on it. And if you see anyone doing petitions or campaigns or work pushing for it, please support them. But I thought I would just share that with you because we don't hear about what many of us are doing within the UK, but also taking it outside and advocating for us on our behalf. It's very important. And I think that was it. That's the last story. That's it really. So where are we? So thank you for being with us. Let me put in Sister Oleander, Brother Colin as ever for the research. I certainly wouldn't have had this program done if you hadn't sent those stories to us, because I literally landed late last night and been working frankly to put it together. Community journalists, spoke about Melissa and some of the many others, legality supporters, and community. And those of you out there just do amazing work silently. We've heard a little bit from FB Comms, who are promoting other organizations while doing that work, supporting entrepreneurs in our own community. I can't stress how important that is. And many of you, like I know Reparation Nations has rejigged their program again. I spoke about Belle Rivera Diero, who's actually still working on the reparations movement inside the Labour Party, despite the constraints of the senior members like Lammy and like Keir Starmer and all the others who would really want to rather shut it down. I know some of you continuing to give donations to the Legality. Thank you. But I think that's me. Sister Oleander, I don't know if you want to say anything. I think you're muted. I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes. Oh God, rookie error, as they say. Sorry about that. I was just saying, give thanks to everybody for listening in and for interacting with us in the chat, and hoping that you have a lovely week ahead of you, or 2 weeks ahead of you. before we see you again. And yeah, hopefully by then we've got better weather, some sun, and well, we have sun, but it's cold sun. We need some hot sun now, or at least warm sun. But yeah, so everybody, I wish you a good week, and take care.
Yes, I don't know what's happened there
I don't know
with.
either.
Okay, let's switch to that. That's me.
Yeah, it just disappeared. I don't know why.
Yeah, some technical
Um,
gremlins, but right at the end. So,
yeah, there's just
okay.
sorry, just a quick message from FP Comms. As a Guyanese, I'm so proud how we are leveraging, sorry, the oil to help us make some positive shifts.
Oh, yes.
And Keith Hall gives us a bit of a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.
Give thanks.
Much appreciated.
And
Those
that's
little
it.
touches, that they touch us.
They
trust me, they
are
really.
important. Absolutely. Give
So, like,
thanks.
give thanks, and we shall see you. I'm just trying to find out the date. I have it written down somewhere, but I've lost the file. On the 12th of May. Yeah, 12th of May. 7 p.m. You know what? We once did it at 6 p.m. So, I mean, well, we'll stick to this time to 7, but, it'll be good to know if anyone's actually interested in us doing it a little bit earlier and kind of getting some consensus on that one. But 6th of May, Sunday, 7 p.m. I say that because then it means I had to wake up
Not
even
6th
earlier.
of May, Toyin. You said 6th of May. You mean 12th of May.
12th of May, 7 p.m. Yeah. And then we'll play around with maybe shifting the time and stuff like that. I'm still trying to find a time that drops in. Weekends seem to be better than weekdays, but we'll see how that goes. Thank you for being with us. And as ever, walk good, be safe, and may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.
Ashe.